Hello, everybody. Took me about 4 hours to get in from Jersey tonight. Gotta say hello to Maliki. What a guy. Just wanted, before I tell my story, I just want you to all know this is a very special group tonight that has gotten to witness David Rothenberg leaving the island of Manhattan. It's equivalent to sighting the dodo bird, the abominable snowman, and the mothership of the UFO. So it's a very rare occurrence. Thank you, David, and we want to say thank you to the Fortune Society who's going to make the presentation tonight. So I'm going to go back quite a few years. So when I was in the NYPD, I was in about the lowest position you could get, which was fine with me. I was a radio car cop in the South Bronx, which meant if I ever did anything wrong, where are they going to send me that was worse? I had immunity, you know. Well, one day, just to tell you a little bit about myself. So, both of my grannies were off the boat from Ireland, came over here about 1920, one from Tip, one from Mayo. And my mother's mother, who was from Tip, when she first came over, she worked as a chambermaid at the Plaza Hotel, 59th Street and 5th Avenue. And I was the oldest of 6 boys. So since about the age of 10, my granny would take me over to the St. Patrick's Day Parade. She was so proud to stand on the corner of 59th Street and Central Park South, where she had worked. And I'd watch the pipe bands come up 5th Avenue. And, you know, when the guys with the big feather bonnets, they looked like they were 10 feet tall. And I'm saying, that's for me, whatever it was. That's what I wanted to be. So I started learning the pipes when I was about 14, and when I look back on it, it's close to 50. It's about 50 years. You know, I was learning the pipes, and then when I went in the cops, well, they had, you know, the pipe band that I had seen and everything like that. And before I continue the story, I just want to give a little recognition. There's a nice lady in the audience, Rose. Stand up for a second, Rose. She's over there. There she is, Rose. Now, let me tell you something. When I was in the police academy, her brother was the head of the Emerald Pipe Band. And he worked in the 25th Precinct, which was just across the Harlem River from the 4-0 where I worked. And I get a phone call one day, and it's Rose's brother, Tommy. And he says, Tommy says, Al, I know you play the pipes. You're in the academy. He goes, meet me over at this joint, Rags, which is a dumpy cop bar across the street from where Tommy worked. Meet me for a beer, I want to talk to you. Okay, go over there. And I'll never forget the words that Tommy said to me. He said, Al, it would behoove you to join the pipe band. I'd never heard that word before, behoove. And when Tommy said it would behoove you, it was like a papal bull, okay? It was an order. It was non-negotiable, but it was put in such a way that it sounded, you know, sweet and everything like that. So once I got out of the academy, I joined the pipe band, and Tommy was the head of the band. So anyway, you gotta understand the way the job was back in the 80s, when I came on. The Irish ran the job. It's not that way anymore, but that's demographics, and I'm fine with that. But when I say the Irish ran the band, that went everywhere, from the lowest up to the highest, and you know, things like that. And a lot of the Irish sentiment, you know, the things in Northern Ireland were very bad. And you know, in the band we had a lot of guys that naturally were Irish nationalists and things like that. So when I grew up playing the pipes, I learned from a lot of guys that were former British Army pipers and things like that. And then I had met a lot of famous British Army pipers. When they would come over here, they'd play at Madison Square Garden. I just got to be friends. And, you know, myself and my wife, we used to travel the world, you know, stay at each other's houses and things like that. So one of my friends, Jim Motherwell, and if you can see this, he became what was called Piper to the Queen. That position started under Queen Victoria back in the 1860s. She went up to Scotland and she enjoyed the sound of the pipes, so she said, I'll have a personal piper who will play for me every day. Well, Jim went on to be selected by Queen Elizabeth to be her piper. But in actuality, that meant he was one of 4 people who was around her all day long. Okay? So he developed a very good rapport with the Queen, and the fact that we had been friends for so long. He was getting ready to retire. He calls me up one day. He says, Al, I'm going in to see the boss. Okay, that's how they refer to her, the boss. And I'm going to ask a favor. I'm going to ask if I can bring you over to play. We're having this big, it's called the Gillies Ball up at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. He said, I'd like to bring you over and ask her a favor. I said, okay, great. I said to myself, like that's going to happen, right? An hour later, he calls me up. He says, book your flight. She says, absolutely. Come on over. I'd love to have you. I couldn't believe it. So the odd thing about it was there had never been an American that had done this before. So here I'm getting ready to go, and I ran into guys, you know, that I'd known in the Emerald Pipe Band, and we're talking over a couple of things. And I said, well, yeah, I'm going over, you know, to play for the Queen. Wow, you think I, you know, had done something, you know, unredeemable. But anyway, that was the sentiment. Anyway, so I get over there, and they meet me at the airport. They send a car for me, and they bring me up to Balmoral. And so Balmoral Castle is very Spartan. It's not a fancy place. It's not like Buckingham Palace or anything you would expect it to be, you know, very fancy. It's like a hunting lodge. So they show me my room. I'm staying there for 3 days. I have a butler, and he's laying out my clothes. I'm not used to this. Well, anyway, there was a dresser there. And on the dresser was a bottle of single malt scotch and 2 glasses. So I said, you know, where'd that come from? The butler says, oh, that's from the boss. I said, oh, okay. So later on that night is the ball, and myself and Jim Motherwell, Queen's Piper, and I think it was 4 or 5 other pipers from the British Army, the top guys, along with myself. Well, they put a card like this on the Queen's table. And this part here, it's in gold leaf. They have the names of the pipers that are playing and where they're from. So, I don't know if you can see it, but it says Pipe Major A. Gonzales, New York City Police Department. Well, these cards are supposed to get destroyed after the event. They're not supposed to be, you know, out there for circulation, but Jim managed to get one. So, you know, I enlarged this here. But I just want to tell you a little something about the Queen. And like I said, I came from an Irish family, and I had found out my great-grandfather had gotten, he was a carpenter, had gotten taken by the Black and Tans, who were a bunch of thugs that, when the Irish were uprising against the British, they sent them in there to really, you know, do some things to the Irish people, and you know, that were brutal. And my great-grandfather was a carpenter, and they took him out of his carpentry business and put him to work for the British. So, you know, my family had always had these sentiments about the British, but I said to myself, you know, the Queen was not the one that was really doing that. You know, the Queen is the figurehead. You got to understand, she's not political. She doesn't make those decisions on British foreign policy and things like that. So I just want to tell you, when I got to meet the Queen, first thing you notice, the Queen is only about this tall. Okay? And she has a little hunch over and things like that. But when I met her, the first thing she said to me came totally out of left field. She leaned into me like this, like a mother would to the son. And she said, "Did you get the bottle of whiskey I left for you?" I laughed. I said, "Indeed I did." And she says, "I was worried about one of the staff taking it." That's how much attention to detail the Queen pays to the things that go on around her. And so I said, well, being a New York cop, I'll say something. I said, well, it's already half gone. The next day, there was a new bottle on the dresser. Think about that. So here comes the ball. After we played for her around the dinner table, the ball consists of, the large ballroom. You can look this up on Google, Balmoral Castle, and the grand staircase, and we played as her and Prince Philip came down. And there's a small little stage, maybe half this size. The Queen has a chair. And now we're doing these dances. And there's one that's called the 8-some reel, which is 4 people across from 4 people. Brendan, you'll know this. Sort of like the Irish dances, the Siege of Venice, and these sort of things. So it's 4 people, you hold hands, you go up and back, side to side, like that. And then one row lifts the hands up, and you advance forward. So now I'm on the end. Now if you look around the room, I'm looking, there's the Queen on the end. And I'm like, oh my God, when this dance advances, I'm going to have the Queen dancing with me. So sure enough, we go there, we cross hands, we go back and forth, side to side, and the Queen goes back. So then later on, Jim comes to me and says, he goes, go get yourself a whiskey. I said, why? The Queen wants me to bring you over to her for a chat. I said, well, what am I supposed to do? He goes, this is the only thing you have to remember. You cannot end the conversation. When the Queen wants the conversation to end, she'll stick out her hand, okay, and take a step back, and that's how you know you can move on. But you just can't say, hey, nice talking to you. Jim brings me over. For 15 minutes, I'm talking to the Queen. And she's asking me, we just had the blackout in New York. It was 2003. She was asking me about that, and I'm talking back and forth. I said, you know what, I'm a New York City cop. I'm going for it. I'm going to start to ask her questions. She loved it. She loved it. And that's why we talked for 15 minutes. I asked her, when you first meet her, you say Majesty, and after that it's Mom in conversation. I said, I have to ask you these questions, about World War II and everything like this. She says, they wanted to move us to Canada, all of the royal family, but my mother, the Queen Mother, said, absolutely not, we're not leaving the country. How would it look if we ran off to Canada and my people are getting bombed? And, I had read that in history books, but I had heard it firsthand from her. So just to wrap the story up, when the Queen passed, and she was at Balmoral, and I had heard back then from people that I talked to there that the Queen wanted to pass at Balmoral. And sure enough, she did. And when she passed, I booked a flight over to go to the funeral. And I put aside all the things that maybe I could have said to myself that, difficulties between Irish and the English. But I was standing there at Windsor Castle as they came up the long walk with her coffin. And as she passed, I said to myself, for me anyway, this is not just the Queen. This is a woman that treated me kindly, warmly, and most importantly, royally. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you, Al.